Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this Tuesday, March the 15th. Nice to have you here. It's so good to see people's faces as we finally have shed the mask in most cases, and we respect people that wear the mask if they need to, and that's wonderful. Just nice to have a choice. And with that, Dee, would you please call roll?
Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Under announcements tonight, we have a few short ones, obviously respecting spring break, I guess. So just want to remind everybody the Washington State Patrol will be conducting the Emphasis Patrol from March 10th through the 20th. So if you think they're just doing it when the students leave, they're going to be doing it when the students come back, but they're also on the highway, as I can tell you today. No, they didn't pull me over. I just want you to know they're out there on 195 and 26 and all the other highways. But keep everybody safe. As of yesterday, March 14th, parking restrictions are in effect for certain areas of College Hill from 2 to 9 a.m. to clear way for our street sweeping crews. They're up there removing gravel and some other things like that. I asked our police chief, Gary Jenkins, to give us a report tonight. He put out a news release about a week ago talking about what the legislature did to try and fix some of the measures they passed in the last session that negatively impacted a number of police departments. So, Gary, would you give us an update tonight? I know that they fixed a few things.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So, as the Mayor mentioned, there were some bills passed in the 2021 legislative session, police reform measures, some of which had significant impacts to law enforcement and public safety. So in the 2022 session, there were some bills that addressed what I think most people are describing as unintended consequences of some of those bills. One of the bills, HB 1719, addresses what's considered a military weapon. So previously in 2021, there was a definition of military weapon as any device over 50 caliber, and law enforcement was prohibited from using any of those devices, which meant that our 40 millimeter less lethal sponge round was unavailable to us because it was over 50 caliber. So this legislative session, HB 1719, changed that definition to allow less lethal weapons to be used again by law enforcement. So that has been passed and signed by the governor, and so now we're in the process of retraining our staff on that device. Another bill, HB 1735, the previous session, there were some use of force restrictions placed on law enforcement, which restricted law enforcement from some community caretaking functions, including protective custody for mental health issues. And so HB 1735 now allows for law enforcement to use force when needed to take someone into protective custody for a mental health evaluation, and also there's a couple other provisions as well. There's another bill that's pending the governor's signature that passed the legislation, which the previous session with the use of force definitions and restrictions prevented law enforcement from conducting investigatory detentions. And so this bill now allows law enforcement to conduct investigatory detentions and use force to detain someone that they suspect has been committing a crime. There was one bill that I actually included in my news release that I indicated was pending the governor's signature. I've since found out that that did not make it back to the floor for a vote in the Senate, and that was on pursuits. Last legislative session, restrictions were put on pursuits to only certain violent crimes, and also required probable cause, which is the same standard to make an arrest, where previously it was reasonable suspicion, the same standard to detain someone. So that bill did not pass, so the pursuit language from the previous legislative session remains, so there are no changes to that bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions of Gary on that? Okay. Thank you very much for giving us an update. We appreciate it. Next on the agenda is commission committee appointments, and I'm recommending to the council Stephanie Rink for the Civil Service Commission, for the Historic Preservation Commission, a reappointment of Matthew Root, and for Lodging Tax Advisory Commission, these are reappointments. Charlene Jasper for a term expiring on December 31st, 24. Barb Wachter for a reappointment for a term expiring December 31st of this year. Jackie Alvarez for a term reappointment for December 31st, 23. And PJ Sanchez for reappointment for a term expiring December 31st, 22. And with that, I would appreciate confirmation. At this point, I entertain a motion.
Move to confirm.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we go to the consent agenda. And with that, our city attorney, Laura McAloon.
I believe you have a workshop presentation
Oh,
by
hold
Welch
it.
Comer
That's
first.
right. I skipped a piece of paper. No wonder it was going, you were looking at that in your computer, and I'm looking at my computer and going, oh, that doesn't agree. We have the Downtown Improvement Project Workshop right now with Sean Colts. Just trying to keep everybody on their toes. Yeah, right, sure. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll introduce Phil Boyd with Welch Comer. Welch Comer is our consultant team on our Downtown Improvements Project, and we've got a number of the team members here tonight in addition to Phil, and I'll let Phil introduce everybody. But we have folks in town to do a steering committee workshop tomorrow, as well as some field work. So with that, I'll hand the baton to Phil.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Mr. Mayor and council members, for having us here tonight. We've kind of got it, it's workshop mode, so as we go through the presentation, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, we're glad to take questions as we move through. Okay? And again, as Sean said, my name is Phil Boyd. I'm with Welch Comer. Let's see. Oh, I got it. Thank you. So we wanted to lay down some workshop objectives, and the first one you see on the screen there, which you guys are familiar with, is the master plan. And it was important that we bring forward all that work that was done on the master plan to make sure we're all kind of working off of the same foundation. Brian Scott will come up here in a little bit. Brian was the lead on that master plan, and he has a great way of summarizing and articulating the importance of that document and how we want to pull that forward into this next phase. We're also going to review the draft public engagement plan for council to comment on. Public engagement is huge in a process like this in a downtown, and very important that you guys have a good look at it and can provide us comments on it. And then the last thing we'll talk about is traffic modeling. That's a big topic. Downtown is complex. We don't want to get really hung up on it in this venue, but we wanted to give you guys at least an initial look at it, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. And again, the objective is so you guys can provide us general observations tonight in any particular direction you might want to give us before we meet with the steering committee and go into full-scale public engagement. So I just did the team introductions. Brian will talk about the master plan. Excuse me, we'll get into the public engagement plan that Courtney Kramer will go through. We'll talk about the project website and the branding of downtown, and Jeff from Frameworks will do that. And then at our office, Melissa Cleveland will come online here and make the presentation about traffic analysis and modeling. She's the lead transportation engineer that's been doing work on that. And then we'll have Q&A as we go through in discussion. So our team, you might look at the team and say, gosh, this is kind of a big team of people. Downtowns are really complex, and it's important that this is done right because you don't always redo your downtown. And so we're the project manager, we'll do the infrastructure design. BDS, Brian Scott, did the master plan, and he does urban design work, master planning, and plus Brian is a great meeting facilitator, and he knows how to push and pull and get things out of people. So he's key. Frameworks is also an urban designer, but they're experts in public space activation and public engagement. And both Leslie and Jeff are really creative people, and that's a component that folks like me might not bring to the table, so it's important. And then our landscape architects, BWA. I don't necessarily expect you to see that. That's the schedule. You guys have seen that before. Those are all the dates and milestones that we're going through. That red box shows where we're at right now. And then this is probably a better representation of how we're moving through the process. All that stuff from the master plan is brought forward and put in at the top. And it's important that we understand that we're at this really big scale. So if there's some kind of detail that comes to you, toss it out and put it in our big part of our funnel so we can start boiling it down as we move through getting your direction, meeting with the steering committee, start talking about developing projects that create great places. One of the things you'll hear a lot tonight is placemaking. This is not all about bricks and mortar, even though I love bricks and mortar and pavement and things like that. It's about creating a great place, and that's what you'll hear a lot about tonight. Continuing to refine that through steering committee meetings, boiling down costs, reaching out to the public, and eventually getting down to that bottom part where council has a menu of options that says this project does this kind of activation in our downtown. And so that's where we're headed with this process. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Brian Scott.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Good to see all of you. Nice to be here in Pullman again to talk a little bit about the master plan that you all adopted some time ago that was a product of the effort we did finishing a couple of years ago. Just as a reminder, we had a lot of public engagement during that process. We had a booth out at the Lentil Festival. We had several community meetings. We had a lot of input, several workshops, a steering committee to work through the process. We got a lot of engagement by people that own property downtown, business owners, people who are passionate about design and open space in Pullman. It was really a highly engaged process with a lot of support, and we heard a lot of opinions during the process. So felt really good about the community consensus we got behind the plan. The plan revolved around 6 big concepts, but Phil alluded to, I think the main thrust of the plan is to make downtown a wonderful, vital, active place for people. And people don't come downtown to park. They don't come downtown to drive through. People come downtown to do something, to have an interaction. And everything you're doing in downtown improvements should be aimed at making it a better place to be. And so we should be really thinking about that. And these 6 master plan priorities are all designed around making downtown a great place for everyone to be. And an overarching message that our team really came away from the process with, downtown's actually already pretty good. You have lovely downtown buildings that many communities of your size across Washington and across the country would be delighted to have the collection of historic buildings that you have. You have a walkable scale of the downtown, a connection to the river. It's not too far to get places. You've got a university that's just right, almost so close you can touch it. It's really actually a great place. And one of the main things is you don't want to screw it up trying to solve some problem. You want to really build on what you have. So our first thought is enhance the gems that you already do have. You've got a couple of dozen great businesses downtown. We enjoyed eating in some of the restaurants. You've got several really good stores. People like to, at least a couple of years ago, people seem to like to compare Pullman unfavorably to maybe another town that's right next to you or some other place. And our take was it's actually pretty nice, and you want to build on what you have and reinforce what's there. And so build on the gems. Think about enhancing the gems that are here. The second one is kind of where I started. Build people-centric. Everything, the goal should be people, and people that are on the sidewalks, in the plazas, in the stores, in the restaurants. The activity that's here should be the major goal, and traffic and parking matter, but it's actually making downtown a great place for people that is the thing. So every single principle all the way through it is how's that going to work for the people that are out of their cars, they're in the downtown, they're using spaces, they're gathering together and making those things happen. As the mayor said, it's great to have our masks off, so the gathering spaces are working better again, so that's really a wonderful thing. And to make that work, we need to activate public space. You've got the the Pine Street Plaza and the High Street Plaza and the other things that are there. You want to take those public spaces and do everything you can to make them active. You want to have them right adjacent to stores and restaurants that are actually opening out onto them so that there's activities happening there. It's not about just a pretty building or just some bushes or something, but it's about activating that space and really making public space a great place to be. The fourth principle is magnify the core. Downtown Pullman is pretty nice, but it's pretty small, and sort of figuring out a way to push out the edges a little bit and have a little bit more activity, make room for a few more people working downtown and things. So we talked about some ways that you could get a little more infill development around the edges to build it up. And then two things that aren't physical improvements as much as they are activating the whole downtown is encouraging entrepreneurship. You've got a lot of good businesses, but you also got a lot more storefronts than you got good businesses. So filling some businesses and doing things that can encourage entrepreneurship and people putting offices and stores and activity generating businesses in the downtown. You should be having lots of programs to do that. We had several ideas for that in the master plan. And then catalyzing leadership to really focus on the importance of downtown. And we think the Pullman Downtown Association and really encouraging strong public-private connected leadership downtown is the key to making all the rest of this stuff come true. The project purpose of the master plan was broad concepts to specific preliminary design, and that's all in the master plan that you've all seen and adopted. To truth test some of the concepts in the master plan will be part of what we're doing here, public communication and feedback to build out those cost estimates, and then phase one projects and final cost estimates, what we'd be doing to build on that master plan this winter and spring. The capital projects, since this improvements thing is about capital projects that were mentioned in the master plan, are working on East Main Street and how traffic and parking is configured. You'll hear more about that shortly. Improving the pedestrian crossings to make it a better experience to be a pedestrian downtown. The Pine Street Plaza and a Festival Street potentially on Pine Street. Northeast Olson Street, Paradise Street, Grand Avenue, the High Street Plaza, a cultural corridor to connect the downtown over to the Heritage Center and the old depot, kind of right there by the library, some ideas for how to build that, and then expanding the trail system that's so great in the rest of Pullman. It gets people kind of near downtown. We should really strongly connect that and build out the downtown. So at the same time, I'm talking about activating space and being organized and leadership. There are a bunch of real specific capital projects in that plan. So just in summary, really making sure that we build on that great public engagement we had early in the plan, and then moving forward with these capital projects. So it's just a quick reminder on what was in the master plan. We're going to try and make sure that master plan is kept right central as we move forward on the physical improvements. Now, Courtney's going to talk about public engagement.
Good evening, Mayor Johnson, members of the Pullman City Council. My name is Courtney Kramer. We have not met yet, though my family's been on the Palouse since the 1880s, so we can play relative bingo later. It's usually a game that I lose, frankly. It's a large, sprawling family. I'm really excited to be here working with Welch Comer on public engagement for the Downtown Pullman Improvements Project. And you may know from my bio, I worked in historic preservation and ran the Downtown Business Association in Lewiston for a number of years as well. So I've been steeped in this work for a long time. If you know my family, you're going to laugh that I'm using the Kramer gift of gab to help communities move big projects forward. We're going to use 5 different approaches to engage with the public for this project. The goal here really is under the whole heading that this placemaking project should be a powerful investment in your community's downtown vitality. And we want to engage and mobilize downtown property owners and business owners especially to create consensus about which projects should move forward. The simple reality is that if you were to do everything in the master plan, the city's ARPA funding won't cover that. So we need to prioritize. We also, I think, want to leave the door open to consider private funding that could come to the table for public-private partnerships that, again, help create a great and vital downtown Pullman. There's a couple of headings that I'll get into a little bit later, but 5 broad activities, city council meetings and workshops. This is a great opportunity for us to build knowledge around the downtown plan, to bring people on board about what's happening and how to get involved and to really build that awareness. We'll talk about the steering committee in a little bit, but again, an opportunity to build knowledge and bring people along with us. We will be seeking feedback through a couple of different tools and channels. We will use stakeholder interviews, which I've already been conducting, as well as focus groups. We're also able to use some digital platforms, I think, further down the process to, be able to go to the public and say, here's 7 options, rank your top 3, in order to really start to winnow down how the city of Pullman will utilize their funding. Public meetings are a great opportunity, whether they're in a council setting or in a more casual setting. We are anticipating having at least one more social function with the downtown property and business owners. This is their neighborhood. They have invested their time, money, and 3 a.m. worries into this neighborhood. We really want to make sure that they're along for the ride. All of this communication is backstopped by a website and communications, and my colleague Jeff will talk a little bit about the branding that we've developed for the project. We appreciate the city's engagement with the steering committee. At the end of the day, it's really important for us to get feedback from a group of folks who are engaged in the community. They are subject matter experts on downtown, as is your staff. We want to be able to use the information that they have to inform the project. Here's the list of the steering committee. In addition to downtown property owners and business owners, we do have a council liaison, and then a number of city staff members will be participating as well. Look forward to our first steering committee meeting tomorrow at the Gladish Community Center. Something that I have learned over time from some valued colleagues is always beginning with the end in mind. Let's define what success looks like at the beginning. And so we are asking the steering committee members to meet with our consulting team, again, to engage and mobilize downtown property and business owners to create consensus on forward movement, and then to advise the city of Pullman regarding which projects should be prioritized. We have begun the engagement schedule. Here we are this evening, city council meeting, tomorrow's steering committee meeting. I've been holding one-on-one interviews or small group interviews over the last 10 days or so. And then our consultant team is in town all day tomorrow to work on the project. In April, we're looking forward to a property and business owner meeting, and we'll talk about with our steering committee how we are making property owners and business owners aware of their opportunity and I would argue their obligation to engage in the process so that they show up. We will again meet with the steering committee and have some deliverables from our consultant team. And the same goes for May and June. Again, kind of it's this dance between city council direction, steering committee input, general public, consultant deliverable, and then you kind of start this cycle over and over again. I'm happy to stand for any questions, but it's probably better if I turn it over to my colleague Jeff Arango, who will talk about project branding. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Good evening, Mayor Johnson, City Council members, Jeff Arango with Framework. Excited to be back in Pullman, have the opportunity to work on this project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a branding concept that we developed for this project. I first used branding for a street project back in 2012, and along with a branded project website, and found it to be a very successful way to communicate with the public. One of the things I found when you're doing capital projects that are, potentially have physical changes to the downtown and impact businesses. Controlling the flow of information is really important. Sometimes as word travels through the grapevine, or so to speak, it doesn't maybe accurately reflect the details of the project. So having a website and other ways to communicate is really, really important. So we wanted to develop a brand that I think spoke to the goal of the project, which is building infrastructure in the downtown, but also was sort of a metaphor for the larger goal of the project, which is to create this reinforce a lively, active downtown and all of the goals that Brian mentioned early on. So the concept that we've come up with, and we'd love your feedback, is called Build Pullman. And we've developed an acronym to go with that, which is Build Urban Infrastructure for a Lively Downtown. And we have a logo I'll show you in a moment. And so we would describe it as a multi-year city-led effort to reshape downtown Pullman streets and public spaces to build community, experiences, and economy. And I just noticed in Brian's presentation that one of our major goals is build people-centric. So it's sort of in line with that. And it includes all the projects that were identified in the master plan, and that was approved by the council. So these are a couple of logo examples, and at the top we pulled a couple of definitions of build, and I think the branding concept really speaks to both of those definitions. Starting with number 2, construct something by putting parts and material together, and we certainly will be doing that, but we also want to make downtown stronger or more intense, more active, more vibrant, more people-centric. And so the logo, I think speaks to that. The one on the right would be sort of a more general logo that could be used for the project. And then depending on what the specific project priorities that come out of this process, we could then have associated branding for those individual projects, whether that's Main Street, Pine Street Plaza, or any number of the projects that were identified in the master plan. And then we would build a website, buildpullman.org or something similar that we would use to communicate with the public. So we'd have a schedule of events, we'd have email addresses and contact information, we'd have a project update page where we could regularly post updates and maybe put comment forms in that people could respond to. It's really meant to be a living website. And I think it's also important to note that we start the engagement process now, and that really continues through to the ribbon cutting. We found that the communication tools that we've set up were really important even during construction. Like someone's going out and pouring some concrete and it's impacting the front of someone's business. So it was that sort of constant dialogue where we were able to respond and really minimize the impact of the businesses during construction, which is really important part of it. So we kind of think of setting the foundation now and this really continuing multiple years out into the future as projects are delivered for the community. So to go along with that, we have some colors and some fonts that we've developed, so all the communication materials, excuse me, will be consistent and represent the project brand there, as well as the website. Any questions on that or feedback?
I do have a question in regard to the whole branding piece and what we're doing with that. And currently, we have engaged another consultant group, Place and Main, who are working on a tourism marketing strategy for us. And they've already been out and done some engagement, did a SWOT analysis, and will be coming back to council in May with some recommendations. I don't want to see, but I'm also maybe getting a little feeling that we might have some parallel universes going on, because some of what you're talking about, and I know this branding is specifically for this project,
yeah,
but we're also talking about those kinds of things with that tourism marketing piece. So I'm wondering how we can, really effectively utilize both sets of resources that we have between the two of you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'd be happy to meet with the folks that are working on that and see where there's common ground. We did do some thinking about, how to sort of structure the branding, given that even this project is just one part of the master plan, right? There's lots of other recommendations in the master plan, zoning changes and other things that aren't necessarily physical infrastructure. So we went back and forth a little bit about, do we brand sort of the broad effort to implement the master plan or just specifically this project? And we sort of felt that it would be a little bit confusing if we tried to develop a brand around implementing the master plan because it's such a longer term thing and involves so many different things. So we felt like focusing the branding just specifically on this infrastructure effort was the most easy to communicate to the public. But if there's opportunities to sort of minimize, these some confusion that could result from these multiple efforts, we certainly would be interested in having that conversation and seeing where it could go.
Yeah, it really didn't strike me until just now when, you started talking about all these things, how there really could be a mesh going on rather than,
Yeah, sure, be
one of
happy.
those.
Thanks
So,
for the
thank you.
comment.
Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're the expert on this, and so I defer to you, but I know with our area, build, when you say build, kind of makes me imagine something industrial, something that wasn't there before, which I can understand, but when you come to Pullman, you go through largest wheat producing region in the world almost, I believe. And our university and our community really believes in continual growth. So you are the expert, but what I'm saying is something industrial coming up against something that's constantly growing, which is what the downtown is going to be. Waterways going through it, so on and so forth. You've already put a lot of work in this, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it, and there's still room, to make adjustments. We want people to embrace it. So, thank you for the feedback.
Eileen?
Yeah, this has been a pet topic of mine, is to have a brand for this project, because everybody's calling it something different right now, and there is, that doesn't move us forward very effectively. So I've been working on a slogan, logo, tagline, whatever you want to call it, with a former council member who is an expert on marketing. And we came up with a list, and I'd be happy to share my list with you if you and I could set even 10 minutes aside, if you're going to be around tomorrow, and
Yeah.
we can run over that list.
Yeah, that'd be great.
'Kay.
We are definitely around tomorrow, so look forward to connecting.
Any other comments? Megan?
I have one question and
Yeah,
then
sure.
one comment. So remind me again what the acronym stands for?
Build
That's the
urban
problem.
infrastructure for a lively downtown.
Okay.
And that's the problem.
And one thought, as someone who has worked in marketing, and I'm sure you love this when people say that and give you their
I'm actually
ideas.
not a marketing expert. I'm an urban planner that does branding around projects. So just to
Gotcha. Okay.
just to clarify that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess where my mind goes is, since you had identified that you weren't necessarily looking at branding the entire long-term project, but we're looking more at, a specific downtown piece.
Yeah.
I would love to see downtown in there be more specific versus build Pullman, because that's really the focus of this
Yeah.
project. So to me, that's missing.
Yeah. No, we've had other feedback along those lines, so we can certainly revisit that. We didn't necessarily come up with a great way to put it actually in the title of the project, but we can revisit that for sure. And we had other comments that were similar to that. We do obviously want to make sure people understand that it's focused on downtown, otherwise it's not going to be very effective. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay.
Thank you.
So I am going to operate as Melissa Cleveland narrates as we move through the traffic study. As I mentioned before, this can get kind of heavy, especially at 7:34, because it can get really technical. So if you guys have a question as we move along, be sure and feel free to stop us. But I'll turn it over to Melissa, and we'll advance the slides from there. So I think you're on, aren't you, Melissa?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Perfect. Okay. So okay, so what happened is that I can't see the slides. Okay, perfect. Just a quick overview. We're going to quickly go through the study area, the goals of the study, talk about those intersection counts and the origin destination study. I think you've been briefed on that before. And then show you what's going on when we model the various scenarios from the master plan. Here's the study area, pretty basic, just kind of your downtown. So the traffic study objectives, first we have to replicate the existing traffic operations in a model. Then we need to understand what's going on with the existing travel patterns to and through the downtown. Then we examine how those alterations that are proposed in the downtown master plan may impact traffic operations downtown. And then by using the traffic study, we can inform the process of implementing the master plan. You've seen this before as well. So we start with data collection, traffic counts, growth, the origin destination study. Then we create and calibrate that existing traffic model. And then we build future and scenarios based on the alternatives that were in the master plan. And then we're only partially getting into the final step, which is identifying maybe some mitigation measures. Here's where the intersection counts were, just kind of all through downtown. If you remember, those were simultaneous and they were collected with video so that we get all the turning movements and pedestrians and all of that. This is just an excerpt out of the software for the origin destination study, just to kind of remind you. I know you've seen this before too. That way we can tell as people come into the downtown, where did they come from? Do they stop in the downtown, or are they passing through and ending up in one of these other gates? Okay, I know that was really quick, but now what I'm going to go through is the origin destination study findings. And what I'm going to show you is in the PM peak hour, which is about 4:45 to 5:45. I think for this study, we looked at about 4 to 6. We have data on the morning as well. We have it for all day, but I'm just going to focus on the PM peak since it's when the most traffic comes through the system. So traffic coming from the east, that's represented by that green dot. And then the downtown is kind of that salmon color. And then the stop signs, those are saying as the traffic comes through the green dot, where does it go? So traffic from the east, 15% of it has a destination downtown. The rest of it doesn't. The rest of it is passing through, and 16% of it is ending up south of town, and almost 50% goes either north or west of town. Of the traffic coming from the west, 8% of it has a destination downtown, 25% is going to the south, 27% going east towards Moscow, and 17% going north. If you come in from the north, again, 8% going downtown, 52% just going straight through to the south, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the operations. And then if you're coming from the south to the north, again, you've got 55% of people just blowing through and going straight to the north. 8% of that traffic has a destination downtown, and then some to the east and some to the west. So the findings, and this is pretty high level, more detail can be provided as needed, but about 50% of the traffic on Grand, and Grand is one of your most congested streets, is strictly through traffic going northbound and southbound. So that's something to be aware of as we kind of get into how we modify the downtown. Roughly 50% of the traffic that's coming from the east is going to the north or west, so that's something interesting to think about. About 10% of the traffic from the north is headed towards Moscow, and about a quarter of the traffic from the west is headed towards Moscow. And about 8% of the total traffic entering the downtown core has a destination downtown. So now I'll get into talking about your traffic and the network performance. So when we discuss traffic operations, we talk about a term called level of service, and I'll explain that on another slide. But we can talk about level of service for just the intersection, then we can talk about it by lane group or maybe leg of the intersection, and then also delay, and that's usually reported in seconds per vehicle. And then queue lengths, that's the distance that the cars back up from the intersection. So when we talk about level of service, A is really minimal delay. So you really don't have to wait at all, and that's 10 seconds per vehicle or less. B, you're getting a little bit of a delay, but it's not bothering you. Maybe you just have to wait for somebody to go by and then you can pull out. C is you're occasionally backed up, or maybe you have to wait for a vehicle or two before you can do the move you want. D is you're still tolerable on your delays, but you may have to wait a little longer than you'd like. And then E, you're starting to get intolerable delays. The motorist is a little frustrated at this point. You might have to wait more than one cycle to get through an intersection. And then F is where things start to really get very congested. Queues can back up into the nearby intersections, and pretty much every motorist is waiting multiple cycles to get through a signalized intersection. And most cities choose D, and I think Pullman has, as their standard for downtowns. So this, what this graph is showing is the main and grand intersection. The blue line is all vehicles, and the orange line is trucks. So the blue line, the scale is on the left, and so you can see that they're not equal, right? So that, and then for the orange line, the trucks, the scale's on the right. So what I'm showing you by this is that you have an extended PM peak. That's not a bad thing. It's just something that's interesting about traffic in your downtown. So your PM peak starts around 3 o'clock, or maybe even a little before that, and then it extends probably till about 6. So a lot of downtowns, they have a pretty short PM peak, so you can say that, well, yeah, there's a peak, but it's before and after, it's fine. That's not really the case with Pullman, because it is extended. So what we're seeing in the PM peak is represented from about 3 o'clock on. And then what I wanted to also point out is that it looks like, if you can go back to that for just a second, Phil, it looks like your truck delivery people have figured out when to deliver, because the peak for trucks is corresponding to the lowest amount of traffic in the day, which is kind of mid-morning. Okay, now you can move on. So I just wanted to show you what different levels of service look like. So I think if you push enter again, Phil, it'll start the second video as well. So level of service D, remember that's kind of like a standard for downtowns. You're getting a little congested. You can see this is Main and Grand, and this is facing east. So you can see that some of the southbound traffic is starting to get backed up from the next intersection south. And then if you look on the right side, level of service B, things are a lot more free-flowing. So I just like to show this because it's a little hard to maybe understand what these different level of services mean. Okay, you can move on. So your existing system. So when we look at your existing system, you already have level of service D on those intersections on Grand and Olson, Grand and Main, and Grand and Paradise. Olson is actually almost an E. That's why we showed that, because if it were 55 seconds per vehicle, it would be an E. Your downtown streets, Kamiakin and Main, Kamiakin and Paradise, those are functioning better. So really, it's Grand and kind of particularly Grand and Main, that are congesting kind of the whole network. So this, as we project out to 2042, that's 20 years from our study, we're starting to get some Fs, and that would be if you did nothing different, right? If traffic grew like we're thinking it may at about 1.5% per year, there were no reductions for any reason, and you didn't really make any changes, you'd be looking at having some Fs in 20 years. So this is the existing simulation. We don't have to spend a whole bunch of time on it. I just want you to see kind of how traffic starts to back up at southbound as it's coming up to the Grand and Main intersection, and how traffic westbound on Main backs up, and that queue length for westbound on Main, sometimes it even extends all the way to Kamiakin and starts to impact the Kamiakin Main intersection. So we went over this quite a bit with the city staff and got this pretty dialed in, and this is just kind of what you've got today. So then as we start looking at what happens when we maybe implement some of the options in the master plan. So one of those is to reduce lanes on Main and Paradise. Now what you start seeing is that Main and Grand, like I kind of mentioned before, it kind of controls a lot of the operations. It becomes an F. And so it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that we need to kind of be looking at options and ways to mitigate it, or just understanding that things are going to get worse and maybe that's okay. So this is the simulation if you reduce lanes on Main and Paradise, and you can see that the queuing on Main is worse, which makes sense because there's fewer lanes to serve that same volume of traffic. The idea in the master plan is to remove the couplet, which would make two-way traffic on Main and Paradise. That also it kind of has a negative effect on traffic on Grand. The intersection of Grand and Main is a pretty serious F. Like not all Fs are created equal. So anything greater than 80 for delays per seconds per vehicle is an F. So that's 240 as an average seconds per vehicle. So that's a pretty serious F. And so that doesn't mean you can't do it. Again, I don't want people to think that means we can't do it. It's just a way to say we might have some concerns if this is something that's really rising to the top through this process. Then we need to go into it eyes wide open with understanding what that means to the downtown. So when you have the couplet removed, you have southbound lefts at the intersection of Grand and Main that you don't have today. So that adds a whole other phase to the signal, which increases delay. And then similarly, you have more movements at Paradise and Grand, and that makes that intersection a little more inefficient. So we can do it. And then I just want to point out that on Grand, anytime we have a PED call, which of course you want pedestrians in your downtown, the rest of the team just talked about that. But anytime you have a PED call, it does really affect the traffic on Grand, because the southbound traffic doesn't really have to stop. It can just kind of go because there's not a lot of opposing traffic. But every time you have a PED call, then all that traffic stops while the PEDs cross. Just something to note. I mean, obviously you want PEDs in your downtown. So this is zooming in on the Main and Grand intersection today, just so you can see that it does have an average intersection delay of 47, which is a D, but that's that westbound Main Street traffic that's really, really kind of dragging it down. The rest of on Grand, it's not that bad. And then if we reduce lanes, westbound Main gets pretty congested. The queue length would regularly back up past Kamiakin. Okay, so if this starts to rise to the top as well, we understand that it's maybe not great from a traffic standpoint, but traffic isn't the only thing that's important in our downtown. I think that we just have to stay involved and inform the process and try to make it as best we can. So again, the couplet, it starts to get congested kind of all over. But I don't want you guys to feel like that means you can't still explore these options. We don't need to talk about this slide. This is just if we need it, Phil, because there's a lot of information and it's really small text. So our takeaways are, right now, I mean, Pullman's downtown has more traffic than capacity. And you saw by the OD study that a lot of that traffic is just passing through and doesn't really have a destination downtown. And that traffic is kind of gumming up the rest of the system. I understand that Pullman, terrain-wise, being so steep everywhere, there's just not a lot of alternative routes for people to take. So that kind of forces everybody right down through the main streets. The Grand and Main intersection seems to control really the performance downtown. Implementing options in the master plan, they do seem to adversely impact traffic performance. But again, we want to point out that this is just one piece of the puzzle, and you are trying to balance between having a successful downtown and traffic operations. Some possible solutions are to build more capacity, primarily probably on Grand, because that's your most congested and the street that carries the most traffic, or maybe even reduce demand. I know that there's been some ideas in the community about a potential east-west bypass. That might have some positive effects just because so much of that traffic is coming from the east to the north or west and vice versa. Improving the transit system, and then just kind of like the other people in our team had mentioned before, the pedestrian and bicycle improvements might also reduce demand. So we recommend at this point real close coordination with WashDOT, just because this is the intersection of two highways, and making sure that anything that the city wishes to move forward with, that WashDOT will support. I think we need more mitigations analysis, including multimodal, as implementation progresses. And so now we have this data that can inform the process, but let's see what happens as the steering committee gets involved and people start to have priorities come out of that. We took our counts in December, and so we are kind of using an informed guessing at this point on some pedestrians. So we'd like to do some more pedestrian counts in the spring when the weather's nice. And I just want to, again, remind you that traffic is only part of this implementation discussion. I mean, you want to be eyes wide open. You don't want to make decisions and not know what might happen, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Are there any questions?
Okay. Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really enjoyed that presentation. Seeing the traffic flow, I think people were getting frustrated at about C for a while, especially as we've grown so quick. I did have a question. Are there, and a suggestion, as far as, first I'll say the suggestion, pedestrian counts, I would suggest when students are here, it is one of the challenges getting them downtown, but if you get them when school is completely closed, then that, it's tough to know how that would impact the downtown.
Right.
Another thing, a question, are there comparable cities that have gone through the process that we are going through that have taken different scenario paths that you've worked with?
Yeah, we've done it here in Coeur d'Alene. We were involved in the McEwen Park project that made quite a few changes to circulation downtown.
So
Is that what you mean?
I appreciate that. Looking at a city that is at least relatively comparable to what we have, it might be interesting to see the different scenarios as they've played out, if that's even possible.
We did
we went through a really similar process. Go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say, we did a similar process in Lewiston. And that's, I think you're kind of headed down the path. The big point of this presentation is we built this model that gives us the opportunity to start to chase these different ideas. And so part of what we wanted to make sure council was aware of that. So as we start rolling ideas forward and we think about things, even when we were meeting prior to this with the team, more ideas were coming out. And so now we have the opportunity to go model those, because you guys will be faced with this proposition of, here's this really cool project we'd like to, or thing we'd like to do in downtown. It requires this modification of the street network, and it's really great and will be really powerful, but what does it do to the traffic? And you, as counselors, you have to balance those things. And so that's what this tool does for you in an analytical way, right?
I really appreciate that, especially we're also looking at how do we activate the waterways? How do we bring more attention that way? So, Thank you.
Francis.
Thank you. So 2 questions that I have on this, and I really appreciate this information. It's very, very good data for us. One, it looked like every scenario that you gave us really was going to impact our traffic in a negative way in those intersections. You did reference the north-south piece along Grand Avenue as a potential option. Now, I'm assuming what you're talking about is removing parking in order to add a lane, or removing parking at certain times during key times. So you could have parking sometimes, but not at other times in order to add a lane. Was that what you were hinting at?
There's probably several mitigations that we could explore. I mean, when you have that much traffic like you do on Grand, several thousand vehicles in the peak hour, I have an inclination to want to increase capacity to accommodate that as a traffic engineer. But as a downtown designer, that might not be the best option. So I think that that's certainly one option to explore, would be to have 2 lanes in each direction on Grand, but that's probably not the only thing.
And just to chase that a little bit further, one of the things when you start to head down that path, before you just unilaterally, let's just take parking away from Grand, well, wait a second, let's pause and see, is there an opportunity to find parking elsewhere near that? So it's not a zero-sum game there. So it's a 2-pronged solution is the way we would approach it. Again, so council kind of has options to look at. You're not solving one problem and creating another problem.
Great. And
Exactly.
I appreciate that you are looking at that way, that holistic and not just throughput. So I appreciate. I just wanted to kind of better understand that comment. The second question I had is, if you looked at our traffic counts that you got for the real life traffic counts, how do those counts compare to Department of Transportation's traffic counts? They have a website that indicates how much traffic is happening at different intersections and different colors. And I'm wondering, did the traffic counts you get, did those map the Department of Transportation's, or were we higher or lower? I'm just wondering, since those counts happened pre-COVID, and I expect there's going to be more traffic as we come out of things, whether your count is actually a lower count than what's actually realistic. So I'm curious if you have comparisons.
Sure. So WashDOT's counts are just average daily traffic. So they don't have like the intersection data like we have. I think the last count they had was 18, and I'm kind of looking, 14. My team is on here. So they don't have real recent data. We did reach out to them to make sure that we were getting the most recent data we could. They do have that website. I know what you're talking about, and it looks like there's data, but they have estimated it since 2014.
Okay, thank you.
So we're comparable. I mean, we check all of that to make sure that our existing conditions model is as accurate as it can be.
Thank you.
Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we worked with the football program because obviously all these people come into town for the weekend and then they all want to leave. And we have signs as you go on Main Street. All 3 lanes will get you to Spokane 195. Do they do that? No. They will always be on that right lane and jam that up when you can go straight up Main and you can find 195 that way. You can go left and you can find 195. And you would tend to think maybe a few of them might follow it. But despite signs, despite even flashing lights that say 3, they still will all jam that right lane. So.
Yeah, and it's hard to change driver behavior, right? So there's one thought that as things get worse with traffic, that people will change their own behavior. They'll find a different route. I know that there's not a lot of routes, but you could go up Kamiakin and then come out at Whitman, and that would be a less congested route. So as things get worse, drivers are smart. They'll figure out some other way to go. So it doesn't. This model is a tool. It's not the only answer. And then one thing I need to point out that my team was speaking up and telling me that when we built this existing conditions model, since we took our counts in December, we did apply a seasonal factor. So this isn't just December data that you're seeing.
A number of delivery trucks also have found that they come in straight on Olson and then turn on Kamiakin, and then they can reach Paradise much easier and other places that way. So some of them have discovered that.
It looked like the delivery vehicles must have figured out what to do because their peak is completely offset from the traffic peak.
I just want to observe that if the intersection gets more congested, that might not be worse. That might be a sign that your downtown is really succeeding and a lot of people want to be there. That actually might feel better, even though it would get you through your downtown slower. So I just make an observation. It's a value judgment. If the only thing you're counting is how fast do the cars get through, then that's one thing. But if you're thinking about the active vitality, how wonderful it is to be in your downtown, that probably comes with congestion. And if you think about all the best main streets that you like going to, wherever they are, I bet it's hard to find a parking place, and I bet the traffic gets backed up because everybody wants to be there. So just making that observation as you're thinking about it.
I looked at the traffic count from 3 to 6. You ought to have happy hours, and that would definitely bring people down there in all kinds of businesses. So.
That's right. Any other questions?
I had one mostly directed towards Courtney when she was talking about having property owners and businesses together in some kind of a meeting. Are you going to make any effort to try and find the out-of-town property owners and get them on a Zoom meeting? Matter of fact, Jen and RJ and Sean and I all met with by Zoom with an owner from Salt Lake City that owns a building downtown, a rather large one that's empty right now. Mm-hmm. And he showed some enthusiasm because of all the things that are going on here to get something going. So I'm hoping that you'll make that effort.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm going to put Councilor Benjamin on the block here a little bit and say it's my understanding that there's a collaboration happening to make sure that we have contact information, not just for the owner, but for their manager, their go-to person, to be able to connect with somebody local as well as the owner remotely. And we can certainly incorporate a virtual engagement session for remote owners into our plan.
And that's part of the Economic Vitality Committee that's with the Downtown Association, and be happy to provide that data for you to make those contacts.
it will help me quite a bit as we pull data with help from the City of Pullman's GIS department. There's over 250 business licenses in the downtown district and about 150 different property ownership entities. Of course, an individual might own multiple entities, but certainly herding those cats takes some time and some thought. Appreciate all the help we can get.
And Jen Hackman has a number of those names as well. We've been working through those numbers. Go ahead.
Any other questions?
Questions or comments? Suggestions? This is the time. Yes.
You know, just one that has to do with the branding and just an idea that we are as inclusive as possible. So I love the silhouettes and all of that, but maybe a silhouette of somebody who's not fully able-bodied in there as well. I just toss that out there.
That's excellent. Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, Mayor Johnson and City Council. I know there was a lot of data that we put at you. One thing I want to make sure that we're portraying, and hopefully are, is we're looking for feedback. We're here, we're your tool, and we want to make sure we get it right. Sean is, by the way, awesome to work with. His view of the municipal world is not common for engineers, I'll tell you. So you guys are, it's really fortunate that we feel great working with Sean because he's really got a great perspective of trying to strike that balance. So we're here, we're glad to answer questions as we move along, and thanks for the time tonight.
Thank you very much. And I know we all have your contact information.
Yep.
So if things come to them at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Send it.
we can wait till maybe 6 and then send it off to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Okay, with that, now it's time for our consent agenda. That was just a preview. With that, Laura McAloon, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 1, 2022. Sorry, I hit the mouse pad. And approve them as submitted. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 105-978 through 106-030, totaling $230,762.62. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106-031 through 106-039, electronic transfers 51, 52, and 832 through 836, payroll direct deposits numbered 74840 through 75186, totaling $960,221.94. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 106-040 through 106-108, totaling $181,462.53. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable electronic funds transfer numbered 02252022, totaling $43,588.91, and a resolution number R-12-22, a resolution accepting the quote of All Play Systems, LLC, for installation of playground safety equipment in Mary's Park and authorizing execution and delivery of the contract for said project.
And I think the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have a motion to read the consent agenda by title only. So do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any item that you just heard would you like to have further discussion on? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 6. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we now move to our regular agenda. Our first item, Tony Bean is here, Executive Director of the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport, talking about a resolution pre-authorizing the acceptance of a U.S. federal and state Washington grant monies. Tony?
Mayor, council members, there's going to give you a quick update on what's happening with the terminal and kind of explain some of the things that are happening federally with the bipartisan infrastructure law, some of the things that are changing with matches and things that go with the building specifically, which are very different than what we did with a runway or what we do with anything else. And I do have an apology. When I prepared this, I asked for 21 million additional authorization. I actually need 32. And the reason is the bipartisan infrastructure law is part of it. because that grant is, we're actually going to be able to compete for that grant. It has to be done by the end of the month. And then the other one is we opened bids on Thursday and got to digest the information Friday with a sticker shock. The engineer's estimate was 14.5, the bid came in at 20.5. And so we're the first airport in Washington State so far that has opened bids. And so now we're looking at, I believe Wenatchee opens tomorrow and Tri-Cities will open on Friday. And we'll take a look at that, consult with the FAA, get back with the airport board, but pricing, everybody knew that it's very volatile, there's a lot going on, and so we're starting to see what that actually is now.
And you might mention, I think you just had one bidder, too.
We had a single bidder, which some of that's bid holds and when we can get grant funds. And so there's some question with the FAA is if we had a grant, because now we have a bid, the FAA can issue a grant on a bid, even if we accept it, reject it, whatever the board decides to do. But we don't know if that's the best course of action. Could we change the scope of the project? How much do we take out? Because it's the apron that was bid. And concrete is where we really need to go. And the mayor can tell you about what we've done when we didn't do concrete. We ended up with big ruts, and the FAA is not interested in that. We're not interested in that because then you just end up redoing it over and over and over. So there are some ideas with the consultant company that we're using with Mead and Hunt, how to deal with that. With that said, just some of the progress report. Local funding, we're close to the 10 million that we set as a benchmark to try to get as high as we could. That being said, BIL funds is a very interesting funding source now because it's 5% match. And 100 million of the BIL funds, so it's $1 billion a year, 100 million of that has to go to non-hub airports, airports our size. We may not have all of our ducks in a row, but they're all in the same pond, and we know where they're at. There's a lot of airports and communities right now, they don't even have a pond yet. So we're highly competitive for the grant opportunities, and what it does is it allows federal funds to come in to take care of those things so we can conserve our local funding to pay for those items in the project that the FAA can't pay for, and I can show you those here quickly. Funding effort, current budget. I set a copy of this on the days for everybody to be able to see and kind of where we sit right now. That bottom line where 2022 current council request, that's that $32 million. And that is the potential additional funds available, plus if we end up with a decision to accept the bid that we do have and the FAA agrees, it takes care of that overage as well. So I don't have to come back here and address the council again for another grant opportunity we can finish. And the mayors have the authority to pre-authorize and sign grants as they're coming in because they come really fast. One of the hardest things that we have is the FAA will issue a grant and we have to have it executed within a week. And when you've got two sponsors, that gets onerous to have to call special meetings and do that. And so this is the normal way that we've always conducted grant acceptance with the FAA. And this presentation will be given to the city of Moscow on Monday. I've shown this site before, parking lot where the terminal is going to go. This is what we'd like to have built out for a full, but obviously we're not going to build this out unless we can afford it. So we're working through those items with the parking lots, the one in the I guess the pink color, the administrative lot that's in the blue, and half of the overflow lot for rental cars. Those won't get built right away. They'll be additive bid items. So as bids come in, if we can afford them, we'll build them. But the large lot that's in the purple on the top, that definitely gets built, and half of the rental car lot will definitely get built. This is interesting because this gets into eligibility. So the way that the FAA does eligibility, they look at all your square footage, and they say how much is public, how much is private, and then they start making a proration out of it. So typically, we match 91.88. When you get into terminal, the items that are in purple and the items that are in yellow are not eligible. So this is the main floor. When you're walking in the parking lot, you walk into the building, this comes into the main floor. Everything that's green is eligible. So they take all of that space And ATO is airline ticket offices. So the yellow, and then the purple is administration, concessions, and rental cars. Now we get into the basement and it changes. So this is the ground level where the aircraft are parked. This isn't public space. Some of it is eligible because it moves, it's the movement of passengers and baggage. So anywhere we're going to move baggage, which is in purple, that's eligible. The rest of the items are not. I think the blue and the gold are eligible, but the yellow and the purple are not. Because that's TSA space, it's airline ticket office space, it's ground support space for airlines, and it's the baggage systems. So we go through and they do a proration. The proration came out as 75% for the building. Then you get into equipment, like the boarding bridge, that's 100%. Any large ticket items that are equipment, so the equipment that we use to transfer baggage, so all of the belts and that kind of thing, that's 100%. The boarding bridges are 100%. So there's a high dollar value equipment piece that goes into that as well, and it's separate from the proration. But 75% proration tells the FAA that we can use all of the money, the $20 million maximum that you can get for discretionary, we definitely can use that. And so this just kind of goes through the process that the consultant's doing right now, and the discussion that we're having with FAA back and forth is how do we use the formula that's in the handbook and how do we get to this proration, and then what's justified under different sets of rules. One of the things with the BIL funds, it's different than our regular grant funds. BIL funding will pay for items that operate under passenger facility charge rules, which aren't the same as regular grant funds, which are airport improvement program rules. So this gets complicated to some extent. It gets into, you start building three-dimensional calculus with some of it with the engineering. But there is a method to the madness. There's a way it's done. And this is pretty well organized, and it's getting very, very close to where we're going to know what Hoffman is actually going to bid. So the match for the funds are still coming out of CARES. And if we end up with BIL funds, it's even better because it is a 5% match. It saves us a significant amount of money. And we are targeting, I believe, $17 million in the BIL funds. And then the other part of the resolution is request for state funds if we can find state matching funds. WashDOT, probably not the building, but WashDOT would probably at least look very hard at participating in the apron. And then the state of Idaho, different things. It's a different matrix that they use. They may decide that the building is something they want to participate in. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Questions of Tony. I had a question of Laura, because the resolution says 21, and Tony needs more. Can we make a change on that resolution to accompany and then pass that tonight?
Yes, you can. So there would be a motion to revise the draft to reflect 32 million instead of 21 million, and to replace the Exhibit A with the new Exhibit A that Tony provided to you. And then we just simply note, if that passes, I'd note it on the resolution, and then the council would vote on the resolution as amended.
Okay. Any further questions of Tony Bean? One other question, just maybe for clarification for the council here. I think you showed that TSA space was not eligible.
It is not. Well,
even though it's a government and it's there and it's, do they pay rent?
Yes.
Because they allegedly pay rent on some
space,
spaces.
If it's office space, they pay rent. If it is screening space, it's cost-free to the federal government. We do not charge for screening space. We're not allowed to. But the downstairs, it's the equipment. Because it's not public space, the space itself doesn't qualify. Even though it's TSA screening space, it's not public. Where the upstairs, where you go through normal screening for your person, that's eligible. But the equipment in there is eligible, and then anything that would be inbound baggage or outbound baggage, so where the tugs would go to pick up or drop off baggage as it's coming in or going out, that's eligible. So there's just a lot of rules to go with it.
No further questions. Do I hear a motion then on this resolution?
I'll move to adopt the resolution with the amendment to increase the amount of grants up to the 32 million and replacing Exhibit A with the one that we've now received.
Second.
Okay. Is that satisfactory, Laura? Just want to make sure. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 2 tonight is a resolution accepting the bid of Motley and Motley. You've heard already how the bids have been coming in, and this is another example of that. I'm on the meetings with the Transportation Improvement Boards, and I serve on that board, and we're hearing statewide all the bids that are coming in at various percentages much higher than what was estimated. And today I was up in Spokane at the community colleges, and we've got buildings going there, and boy, those prices are coming in high too. So with that as an introduction, Clayton, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. I appreciate that, and good evening, City Council. So the roundabout project on the agenda tonight is located at the intersection of Terryview Drive and North Fairway Road. This is in the northeast portion of Pullman. And for those that are in the attendance tonight, either here or watching from home, that project location is shown on the screen. So on this slide is a depiction of those roundabout improvements at the intersection. As you can see, the intersection will be completely rebuilt. Pedestrian and bike facilities have been included, and the design accommodates all turning movements associated with our city transit buses. So with the transit, bike, and ped improvements, this project meets our complete streets policies. Concrete splitter islands will be built on each approach, which will provide pedestrian refuge areas, as well as slow down vehicle traffic as they approach the roundabout. Other work includes intersection lighting improvements, traffic control signs and striping, new storm drain infrastructure, and a water main extension through the intersection. Bids for the project were opened on March 3rd, and 2 bids were received. The low bidder is Motley with a bid total of $1,225,228.16. The low bid is roughly $329,000 above the engineer's estimate, which equates to approximately a 36% difference. These figures are included in your council packet for your reference. The engineer's estimate was prepared by our engineering consultant, Parametrics, on February 7th when the project was sent out for advertisement. Following the bid opening, city staff did a thorough evaluation of those bids and a comparison to the engineer's estimate. Here's kind of the key takeaways. As Tony alluded to a little, and the mayor as well, material cost increases and inflation have been on a steep climb, leading to volatile material prices that are hard to predict and hard to estimate. Our consultant did increase their unit prices on their estimate to account for this, but they fell short. Also, the Ukraine-Russia conflict started in between the bid advertisement and the bid opening date, which led to further escalations in material costs and fuel cost increases. Talking with Motley and Motley, they informed us after the bid opening that their piping quotes for material piping quotes that they received from their suppliers were only good for 10 days. So that just kind of speaks to the volatility out there right now. And there was one other major discrepancy between the estimate and the low bid, and that can be traced to 2 bid items, mobilization and removals, which our consultant just underestimated. So based on our review, staff recommend award of the project to Motley, the low bidder, based on the following reasons. Number 1, staff has determined that the low bid is fair and reasonable given the current climate. Number 2, rebidding the project would require rescoping the project. And really there's nothing to strip out of this project that would save us any significant money to still leave us with a fully functional roundabout. Number 3, contractors are beginning to fill their plate for 2022. So rebidding this project will likely lead to less bidders, if any, and higher prices. And last but not least, number 4, the project is partially funded through a TIB grant, and our obligation with TIB is to construct the project this year. Failing to deliver the project on time per our grant agreement will reflect badly on the city and hurt our chances for further future grant opportunities. So we want to be aware of that. TIB does understand the current construction market, as the mayor mentioned. In light of this, they have agreed to increase their contribution, their grant contribution to the project from $732,000 approximately to $842,000. That will help us make up some of the difference. Reserves are proposed to make up the remaining difference with a budget amendment to follow later in the year. If council authorizes award of the project, work is expected to begin in May and be completed by mid-August. And I would be glad to take any questions.
Okay. Pat?
Can I make a motion?
I just wanted to, if there's any other kind of comments. Okay, then go ahead and make your motion.
Move to adopt resolution number R-14-22.
Second.
She wanted to make sure there wouldn't be a change, within the next couple of minutes, with that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Laura, would you read the resolution, please?
Resolution number R-14-22, a resolution accepting the bid of Motley Inc. for Terraview Roundabout at North Fairway project and authorizing execution and delivery of the contract for said project.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Call Motley right now, get it going. Okay.
I'm on it. Thank you.
Knock down on
Appreciate
that
it.
price.
Yeah. It's, no, it's just, you talk to contractors around the country, and we've been experiencing that with the airport in terms of, okay, can we even get that piping, and is it even available? And we even ordered steel already, just because they're trying to get it ahead of time. You have to have almost like a year time to get some of these things done. Item number 3 is a resolution tonight accepting the bid of RD Electric. With that, Sean Coulter, Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item tonight is to look at a bid price, accept a bid for improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, and that is essentially to replace several admin building panels and transformers. And effectively what we're looking at is we've got multiple electric panels and transformers that need to be replaced. Essentially, these components of the wastewater treatment plant have exceeded their useful life, essentially. So to give a few examples, we've got circuit breakers that if you turn them off, there's still current that is flowing through the breaker. And so that becomes a safety issue for our staff. We've got other cases where the circuit breakers, for example, won't even break the circuit if there's an overcurrent. So we've got some challenges with old equipment, essentially. So we're ready to replace that. This is an item that's in our capital plan. We've got the budget there for it. We had 5 bids that were received on this project. The low bid was $105,195, and that is within the budget constraints of our capital plan. Fairly straightforward electrical project, just doing some upgrades at the plant.
Any questions? If not, do I hear a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Laura?
Resolution number R-15-22, a resolution accepting the bid of RD Electric LLC for Pullman wastewater treatment plant admin building panel replacement and authorizing execution and delivery of the contract for said project.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Sean. Next comes a discussion item, Pullman Moscow Regional Airport Terminal Financing. And with that, we go to Mike Urban.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. This was an item that we were going to bring back to you a little earlier in the year, but we timed it out to go with Tony's presentation tonight, so you had more up-to-date financial information, although it was not the financial information we were hoping for and wanting with the $14 million piece coming in at $20 million. But nevertheless, staff is starting to work on CIP items and starting to work ahead towards budget. And the council has pledged $2 million towards the airport funding as our local match. So as we go forward with our CIP and TIP portion, we just wanted to get a discussion in front of council to talk about which funds made the most sense to use. And then that way we can plan as appropriate. So if you remember back in November, the council requested that the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee review this and see what number they felt comfortable with as far as pledging toward, against reserves and what was coming in and their workload. We've attached the minutes from that meeting, and the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee recommended going up to 1.5 million of that $2 million. Staff then looked at what other funds made sense and how we could connect the dots on those. And I'll just start right now. You know how protective I am of the general fund, so I kind of took that off the table unless there's some further discussion for council that says, let's look at the general fund for that particular item. So the next fund that we came up with and looked at was the 404 Stormwater Fund, because the airport has been paying in to the Stormwater Fund since well before 2009, but the best records I can find were in our software up to that point. They've paid in
$6.98 a month, plus the others. I just signed another one today.
Yeah, but back in the early part, it was $400 a month, and yeah. So they've paid in a lot, and I know that there's a portion of this terminal project that is a large stormwater portion. I think it was estimated at $835,000 at one point.
And a lot of that's to take care of the de-icer.
Yeah.
We have to figure a way to, we have to retain it, and then we have to pump it out, and then we have to find a way to get rid of it correctly.
Yeah. So there is a definite stormwater nexus on that we can, and since the airport is in our jurisdiction, it's not like we're spending money outside of the Pullman city limits. So that's a definite direct line, so we wanted to bring that up as an option too. And then as we looked through some of the other ones, it became a little less nebulous, and we can get there with some coaxing and some thoughts on how the project's developing. But as you can see, we're starting to get really close to that 2 million if council wants to max out some of these. But, as a third option, I wanted to certainly touch on the American Rescue Plan, because we are having some dollars set aside right now. Council's pledged $120,000 of that towards the Downtown Pullman Association to hire an executive director. There's the funding piece from the marketing plan with Golden Shovel that was just approved recently, so we'd like to bring that back as a budget amendment to keep that thing moving along. And again, the Welch-Comer piece for all the downtown. And as Courtney mentioned earlier, that even if we wanted to do all the BDS items, the American Rescue Plan dollars won't get us to the end, so that menu is going to be very, very important. So that's another opportunity for some dollars there, because some of the American Rescue Plan is bright line to be used for stormwater as well. So there's a direct line there. So really for us, just wanted to have a council discussion, see where the how you felt about some of these, see if you wanted us to go back and do some more research, and that way when we're building the CIP and the budget, we'll make sure to include these items in there, because as the construction gets going, Tony's got a fair amount of money to get started. He really won't need our dollars until 2023, so putting it in those budgets and in those items makes the most sense, as opposed to coming in front of you and asking you for a full budget amendment now. But when we bring the final budget at the end, we'll be sure to point out these pieces there. So I'm just looking for a little direction, not to get us started. And certainly during the budget discussion, if things change and evolve, there can be more on this, but just something to help us out to get started.
We'll go to Pat first. I saw you go for your microphone. I think you beat everybody else on that one.
I just need some clarification, Laura, and maybe some reminder. about how we're able to redirect that Lawson Gardens bond money to the airport. That's 700,000.
That was an LTAC grant?
Right.
It wasn't bond funds?
Right, no, sorry.
But because it's not being built, so it was allocated
Okay.
to that, so it simply comes back into the civic improvement fund as unrestricted funds.
Okay, thank you.
And we would need council to take that official action to unrestricted.
Yes,
at
to
some
go
point.
back to
Okay.
it, to put it back into
Yeah,
that fund.
everything just kind of got a little muddied up when we were initially talking about that, and I just needed to have some redirection there. Sure. Thank you.
Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I really appreciate you're digging through all this, everybody is, to find these monies. My question is, so you're also looking at the American Rescue Plan to help kind of shore up where we're, is that right?
I'm not recommending it, but it's an option.
Okay. I'll just say, absolutely, the airport will bring in people, money, tourism, so on. However, I don't feel comfortable with looking at the American Rescue Plan as doing that, and mainly because, as a small business owner, and I know there's a few others around the table, a lot of that money is going to help other businesses, small businesses, local. I don't think it would be looked at very well by the community for us to be doing that. And so I'm just saying I wouldn't be comfortable with that movement.
Gotcha.
Okay. Eileen?
I think stormwater looks like the best way to connect the dots at this point in time. Maybe not exclusively stormwater, but I think the lion's share could come out of that unrestricted stormwater.
Sure.
Francis?
So it looks like we're trying to do 2 million, and LTAC has already said they'd be willing to do 1.5 of that, which means the other $500,000 could be stormwater. And I'm fine with that type of a setup.
Okay. Becky?
I just have a question. So there's like $1 million in the stormwater fund, and we would be taking $500,000 out of that. Is there like a detriment to that? Like, I don't understand the impact of that.
So the stormwater is one of our regular utilities, so as the year goes on, we do charge a stormwater fee to the water and wastewater sewer bills. So it'll continue to build, but it does have expenses as the year goes along as well. So really the critical piece on this and why I'm here is as we work through the CIP, we start looking at stormwater projects too. So we've looked at what do we need in the stormwater fund to do some of these CIP projects. So we don't want to overtax that if the 1.5 and 5 ends up being the answer. So is that kind of where you were driving with your question?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I just don't understand the impact of taking that $500,000 out there, like what the consequence of that would be.
Then what I'd like to add is that if there was a stormwater project that we wanted to do, which there isn't, I mean, there's the regular ones in the CIP that would have an impact. Drawing that reserve down, we're not drawing it down to a dangerous level. We still have a healthy reserve by doing it, and that was what I was trying to articulate in this as well. But if a large grant came up for stormwater that we were eligible for and we could probably get, and we would need a local match for, that could present a challenge. But what we've done in the past on that is we've done an interfund loan from another utility fund so we can go after it until we can build back the stormwater reserves, and then we pay interest back into the stormwater fund. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments or suggestions? Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity. We'll keep you posted as this goes along and make sure that when budget time comes and even through CIP, we'll just identify that this is the route, and if things change in November when budget comes out, we're ready for it. Thank you, Council.
Okay. Is there any new business to come before the council tonight? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Pat is really fast tonight. Just want you to know that. We've had a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I
That's
don't
right.
want anybody else to leave. I mean, it must have been something we said.